Right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Burgess Salmon stage and our session this afternoon looking at road users' expectations both now and in the future. We've got half an hour to debate this. We've got a fantastic panel for you today, and we're going to take questions from the floor as well. Brief introduction. My name's Anthony Smith. I'm the Chief Executive of Transport Focus. We're the independent statutory watchdog for the users of the Strategic Road Network. If you haven't been to our stand, it's round at G5. Do go and have a look. Lots of goodies there, lots of great people you can talk to. Some of them are here as well. We produce a lot of evidence about what road users like and what they don't like, and we get some very clear messages about safety is obviously crucial. People want journey time predictability, and people want their voices heard in the debates and decisions about the road network. So we've got a very user-based approach to all this, but do go and find out more at our stand. So a very simple question. What do road users need from the network now and in the future? We've got the panel, Richard Tilden, Head of Commercial Vehicles at Lex Autolease, and Ian Luckett, the Director of Luckett's Travel and also the current President of the Confederation of Passenger Transport, and Tom Usher, who's the UK Business Development Manager of Europcar. I'm going to ask them both to say 2 minutes about their businesses and what they need from the road network. Ian, do you want to kick off?
We have buses and coaches, and our job is to get people to where they want to go to efficiently and at the times they want to go, which is not always as easy as it needs to be. So personally for our business, what we need is consistency. We need to make sure that if we're planning someone's journey and we say it's going to take 2 hours, we need to make sure that it does take 2 hours and not 4 hours, because we've got a lot of legislation that surrounds our businesses and drivers' hours, which I know that is a major issue for a lot of people. One of the major issues that we'll all get to talk about, I'm sure, is congestion. One of the major issues with public transport at the moment, especially in city centres, is congestion. London, the average speed of a London double-decker bus has gone down from, I think, 9 miles per hour to 6 miles per hour. It gives really poor journey experience for customers, and there's anecdotal evidence of people actually walking rather than taking the bus, which is obviously not a great thing for the city itself. So what we're looking for is consistency. Okay.
Very simple message. Tom, you've got a few cars on the road, a few vans. Yeah, what do you want from the network?
We've got about 60,000 cars and vans in the UK on the road. We are Europe's largest car rental provider, but that's not the only thing we do, and I think that's something that can be seen today also on this conference. Our product portfolio is diversifying, and that's very much due to people's travel behaviors changing and actually what they expect from how they get around from A to B in the future. And we're trying to accommodate those trends. But I don't believe, I can launch any kind of project on the roads today. That's not a problem. We've got car sharing, we've got ride sharing projects. In itself, creating those solutions is not the issue, but they can't sit alone in isolation. They need to be part of a wider network. This could be partners, this could be infrastructure for obvious reasons, but also working alongside government. I've done several projects across Europe, be it multimodal platforms, but also standalone business models around ride sharing and car sharing. And in all cases where we've seen the most significant uptake is where we've had public sector engagement that could be in form of government, but also local public transport providers. None of these new mobility solutions of the future will be able to stand alone, and they need to be part of a wider network. And that's why I believe what we need from the future is actually some collaborative efforts rather than people trying to develop solutions on their own.
Okay, so you want more government?
Basically, yes.
Excellent. Richard, you're financing a few vehicles on the road?
We Lex Autolease, we are the UK's largest leasing provider. We've got 371,000 vehicles on the road, of which 109,000 are commercial vehicles. So as head of commercial vehicles, my customers expect from me minimal downtime, making sure their vehicle is working profitably and earning them money. And I think their key issues are, so we obviously funding across all sectors. Their key issues are downtime, so and that's now being classed as downtime by not being able to move from A to B. So a home delivery fleet, for example, at Tesco's, if their truck does not arrive at your doorstep at 5 o'clock when it was promised, they will lose that customer 90% of the time to Asda, because the customer is becoming more with more choice. We also support a huge construction fleet, so around about 40% of our fleet is probably in the construction sector. So our customers are after health and safety advice on the road, working at height rules, working time directive. And more and more in the car side of things, they're asking for data. So we're becoming more of a data business that is enabling our customers to make decisions. And this includes telematics and all that sort of good stuff, and that happens to lease vehicles. So yeah, that's probably where we are today.
Okay. Where do each of you see where things are working well at the moment? Where would you point to in the UK and say, that's working well, we want more of that? Ian.
There are lots of good news stories. I mean, there's been a lot of effort placed with the smart motorways, which I can see the benefit of doing that. I know there's been a lot of adverse publicity about that, but I haven't got any data to support it, but I do believe that they are a good thing, and they've certainly released some hotspots, traffic hotspots. In fact, I believe the first smart motorway was the M42, which goes past here, and whilst you might have to do 40 or 50 miles an hour sometimes, you are actually moving all the time, so I think that's quite a benefit. The sharing of information is one thing I was going to come on to. You mentioned data, and I think it's the more data we can collect, the more information, this big data project that everyone seems to be talking about at the moment, if you can gather all those bits of information, make sense of it, and then disperse that amongst the people that need it, I think that's probably where it's inevitably going that way. I just think we need to speed it up and make sure that it's an open platform. There's far too many proprietary bits of software and hardware, and you kind of think, God, if only I had an Apple, or if only I had an Android, I'd be able to use this bit of software. It needs to be open platform.
And do you think it's only government that can specify that?
I think it's probably bigger than our government. I think it's probably an international standard, beyond my pay grade, unfortunately.
Tom, where's it working at the moment?
Where is it working? I think that question tells it all. It works in very individual areas. It's quite fragmented. There's plenty of support available if you look for it. We've received several grant funding initiatives, be it for hydrogen fuel cell vehicles or for charging infrastructure. But again, it all feels a bit like a disjointed effort where you're not seeing a consolidated approach. I believe that's also down to some historical reasons in the UK. If you look at our public transport provision, it's a fragmented environment. Therefore, launching any initiatives requires significant more effort actually in trying to bring it all together into one spot. So where is it working well? I think one area I would say where the UK does seem to be doing something quite interesting is around autonomous vehicles. We have some of the leading pilot projects in Europe and probably in the world. And I would say that's a very interesting area, but very much driven by individuals again, and not tying that properly into the rest of the network.
Richard, where's it working well for you?
I think the smart motorway obviously is one. Being a driver who drives 40,000 miles a year, I think that the modern road surfaces with lateral spray for safety, a new road surface now is so much better than it was 20 years ago, for example. But I think as well, where our customers are starting to see, they're asking us a lot of questions. So the modern, the low emission zones that are coming our way, 27 proposed low emission zones. I think that will help things work well. I think it will drive change faster. Customers are coming to us already, so I've got 8 engineers who go out and consult with customers on vehicle movement, to adoption, to staff training on how to do it, and actually look at the operation and make it work for them. So, but I think that will drive. I think that's probably a good move to start to make things work better.
Yeah. I find it interesting that we've got here 3 private sector organisations that seem to be saying, government, tell me what the answer is. But surely you're the private sector, you should be predicting the future, you should be coming up with this, because the future's clearly coming. We don't know quite what it's going to look like.
Just said, and I totally agree with it, it's that the road network needs to mirror the demand, and actually legislation is going to create or deny people the use of their vehicles. The low emission zone is a classic. I mean, as you know, we're deeply embedded with that, with the passenger transport industry, with low emissions vehicles and hydrogen fuel cells and electric this and electric that, which if we can convince people it's the right thing to do, then maybe it'll take people off the major trunk network, and then actually they might be able to devise better routes for the traffic to go on rather than just keep making the traditional routes bigger.
Right, okay.
And I think for example, you wouldn't want, home delivery fleets are growing at 20% year on year. So one of the things when you look at, say, they wouldn't, as a private sector, they won't be demanding, shut off the city so I can't get into it and make me buy a load of 80 or 90,000 pound trucks. Now, that I currently pay 25,000 for. So there is a certain element of government having to drive behaviour from private sector, but private sector needs to be saying also we have demand on this infrastructure. Is you make us want to do, you want us to go into electric vehicles, well, give us the resources to do this in terms of charging areas or a strategy that we can buy into. So currently, we would ask our customers to buy a pod or a charging point at 5, 6, 10,000 pounds. And have it on their operations. So, but that stuff needs to be available freely.
But this is a real key point, though, isn't it? Because we've got increasingly sophisticated vehicles that can do all sorts of things. The drivers are getting a bit more sophisticated, arguably. But the infrastructure is as dumb as hell, isn't it? I mean, traffic lights change whether there's a car there or not. It's ridiculous. It hasn't really changed since the Edwardian era. So who is going to pay for that intelligent infrastructure? You?
All of us.
Whether it comes from
government or whether it comes from directly from our pockets, is we're all going to have to pay if we want it, and that's a bigger argument for here than for here perhaps. But
and if you look at green energy, for example, I've done a lot of funding in that sector in previous career, and that's driven by the feed-in tariffs, which is a 6% levy on all your household bills. Yeah. So that's been this is how it might be able to be done, is through either higher charging on the network, i.e. toll roads, or small amounts of money. So Austria, if you drive, I drive through Austria on a regular basis, and it's got a phenomenal road system because you do pay a small toll. It costs you 10 euros to go 100 miles. Now that's not a lot of money to pay for the infrastructure that they have that is always moving.
We are going to have to come across this argument very soon, because as fossil fuel usage gets driven down and electric usage gets driven up, it's not going to take a genius to work out that the government gets hundreds and hundreds or billions of pounds in duty from that. So where are they going to get it from? Are they going to place it on a pay-per-use basis, or are they just going to stick the lost billions onto income tax?
Yeah. Now, I'm just struggling to see where the big change is going to come if you've got piecemeal initiatives and nobody's really willing to put up the billions to install whatever it is we need alongside the strategic road network. It seems a bit stuck at the moment.
It's a very difficult thing for government to do, because they have to vote, and it's like turkeys voting for Christmas. There's some very unpopular policies, like should they ban anything under Euro 6 cars in the city centre? Well, there's a lot of public people who have got, a lot of the public that have got old cars and dirty polluters. They're actually polluting worse than commercial vehicles, but when you're a commercial organisation, you've usually only got one vote. And there's a lot of public out there.
Tom, who should pay?
Well, I don't think it's a fair debate in the first place, because you're not considering all the costs involved in this. If you're looking at banning certain types of vehicles, or the cost of fuel combustion engines and so forth, that considers the cost as we classically see it. That doesn't involve all parts of the value chain, which I know that sounds a bit green and hippie, but the environment is also, there's a value you can attach to that. And I don't think the current models we use to assess actually what is included in value and what something actually really physically costs, I don't think the models that are currently in place are the right ones to assess that properly. And by the way, I believe these things will develop naturally to a certain extent. I think the question really is, how quickly do we want to make these things accelerate? The government's announcement for 2040 to ban combustion engines is, I can make many statements for 2040, that's not a problem. But I believe if we want to see some acceleration, there's no choice other than government stepping in. That's what we've seen elsewhere, that's what we've seen in Scandinavia, that's what we've seen in some of the other European countries. Unless we, and I think it's also a decision, it can be driven by the local population. You can see there's definitely a drive for green. People do appreciate it. I think my girlfriend's just moved across from Germany on a more personal note, and we were in London the other day, and her eyes were red. And she was saying, where have I moved to? And it's like, well, this is London. It's got its downs and ups. And I think as we have more and more bad air days in London, where we're not being allowed out in the streets, I think that will, over time, definitely have a material effect on people's opinions. We could act faster now to prevent these kind of things from happening, but otherwise, I think we'll end up in a situation where more and more people will be seriously negatively affected by these effects. So.
I think you're right. Air quality must drive a lot of these debates because we can't carry on like this. So something's going to have to change, and it's a genuine emergency in a sense. Question: what's the impact on your businesses of the increasingly autonomous vehicles? When will you hire out your first driverless car? Can I do it now?
We're actually working quite closely with several providers because obviously most of the autonomous vehicle projects at the moment are non-commercial to start off with. They're much more in the space of exploring the technology itself. We'd be keen to, if there's any autonomous vehicle providers here today, happy to have a chat with you. I think it's something that would go down really well with our customers. It's, I've driven some early prototypes. Well, I haven't driven them, I guess that's the well, I've traveled in them, yes. And it's, it's a fun experience. It's very different. So, we would encourage this. And I think having these available for people to use, I think when you go on your holidays, especially for people coming to the UK, they don't like driving on our particular side of the road. So I think that would be another welcome addition to our fleet and enabling our inbound customers to have a more safe and pleasurable driving experience here.
Yeah, I think Tom's right. The move to usership is going to become more prevalent, and the electric vehicle is a halfway step because electric vehicles are far easier to make autonomous than an automatic or a manual gearbox powertrain. So we're starting to step, and as a leasing business, we would have to look at the risk and how we set our residual values and how much risk we put on this and the value we can drive costs down to customers. So most of our customers make a decision based on the whole life cost of an asset. So if the whole life cost is about usership, i.e. cars has been available to use or turning up to your vehicle, and that we would need to change our business model quite differently, i.e. probably to large providers of these sort of vehicles rather than the individuals where we are now, so individual companies.
I think that's an important point. So what I was referring to is obviously the short term with new projects and products being introduced to the UK, but obviously longer term, I believe autonomous vehicles will have a severe impact on all of our business models, be it Lex, ourselves, I assume Luckett's the same. All of a sudden, we are in a very different operating field. It could be cab providers. No one who has wheels on the road will have the same business model once we have autonomous vehicles on the road at scale. And again, infrastructure is a point. You're absolutely right. EVs are the logical propulsion for these kind of vehicles, and again, that will need to be supported by sufficient infrastructure being placed to recharge and whatever other steps need to be taken to prep these vehicles.
And then when I talked about earlier about being a data provider and a leasing business second, that is where we're moving to. So we need to help our customers with this information. So we glean information from the 371,000 vehicles we have on the road. We provide that and wrap that, give comparisons against customers' own models. But we need to sort of change the way we think about data. So we're gathering already telematics data, we're gathering driver app data, walk-around app data, we're gathering all sorts of different types of data for our customer, put them in a machine and give them a report about their fleet. And it's kind of interesting if you go electric and then autonomous, it's going to be a completely different way of thinking, but we're kind of getting there in steps and we need to change all the time.
Ian, I mean, people like your drivers, don't they? That's part of the experience. So are you going to redeploy them as hosts? Or?
Well, and it's a really, really interesting point because everyone talks about in our industry, wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to have drivers driving these things? It would be more cost effective for us and we wouldn't have some of the accidents. But I think the challenge that we have is if we don't have drivers, what are we actually selling? What's the product? And it's if you look at it, it won't be Scania necessarily or Volvos that are making these things. It'll be Tesla, Apple, Google, whoever it is, someone that's not there at the moment. And then will they be selling them to people like us to run around with, or will they just be using us as garaging depots to host their product? Now you get the whole thing about you guys are selling services where you get 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people in them. We're selling services where we can get groups of up to 75 people together in them. I think society may change and then we may not want to get 70 people. Buses, I think, will still have a massive future. Coaches have still got a future in some way. Whether it's autonomous or not, I don't know. We'll probably be driven down that road, if you excuse the pun, because everything else on the road will be autonomous and we will be the weak link in this technological jigsaw puzzle. But an interesting thing that came out at the Scottish Coach Confederation of Passenger Transport Conference that I've just been to is with these sort of autonomous taxi type vehicles, unless people change their travelling habits. So if everyone wants to go at 8 o'clock in the morning, you're going to have loads of full pods going one way and empty pods going the other way. And what you actually want to try and do is join up, just like a logistics company would do, where all the journeys are and how they're going to occupy these vehicles. Because what we want to do is take congestion off the road.
Which must be to do with data.
It's interesting because on a small level, on a micro level, our business has a car share policy because we've got tight car parking spaces, driven mainly by that. But conversely, it also has a flexi working arrangement, so employees can have flexible working arrangements, day off here, working 9 to 8 or whatever. So, and that's almost counterintuitive. So businesses, I think, with employees coming to work, home working will make a big difference. I think as we move more, I've been home working since 1992, and more people now are home working, so then maybe that will change some behaviours. It's difficult to say.
That will certainly have a massive impact on car sharing,
Yeah.
And maybe even car rental, because if you need a car 5 days a week to go to work, you generally have a car, and your wife or partner might have a car as well, and you'll have two cars in the family. If you only need one car every now and again, you might just rent one to go and drive to work or use public transport. So I think.
But you're still moving a vehicle from your house to there and leaving it for the day while you go and do your stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you could use public transport, and I would, of course, advocate using public transport.
Have we got questions from the floor? Anybody?